It's time for Southern Fried Baseball, presented by College Baseball Central. Hosted by Jake McKeever as he talks everything SEC baseball and more.
Welcome in, College Baseball Central fans. The train rolls on in Southern Fried Baseball as we take a stop into Starkville, Mississippi, and review the Mississippi State Bulldogs. It's hard to believe this, but Mississippi State has missed the tournament 2 out of the last 3 years. I know that when I was in school at Mississippi State, they did reach the top of the mountaintop a few times. They went to Omaha, consistent. I know that the Lamotas team that won it all talked about how they had already been there, knew where everything was. 2 disappointing seasons after that. Obviously, it's been very well documented. And then last year, they were a 2 seed in a very, very tough regional with Virginia. Had an argument to be a 1 seed. Obviously, with how stacked the SEC is, it seems to be really, really tough. And you really can't go wrong picking who's going to be a host. Mississippi State showed a ton of fight in that regional, getting all the way to the regional championship. We're going to talk about it here in a little bit, but it almost seemed like it was the Pico Coon coming out party. There's a lot to like about this. Chris Lemonis obviously was on the hot seat this time last year. I think he has solidified and kept his job. He hired a tremendous pitching coach, which was their Achilles heel, and we saw the fruits of that labor coming to fruition very, very fast. But before we jump into roster deep dives, you know how it is. Always going back to our slideshows here. Like I said, Mississippi State is going to be the 8th one that we have. A little bit of scheduling notes. This will be the last single episode that we have. As going forward, we're going to double up and triple up in some cases down the stretch. So Mississippi State, since it is one of my alma maters, we're going to be talking about them in their own separate episode. Obviously, in stadium rankings, this one comes as to no surprise, as Dudy Noble Field is number 1, taking over that spot from Bob Walker. I got the pleasure of having my freshman year at the old dude and my sophomore year at the new dude. So I got to see a little bit of it both. And the new dude is just incredible in every way, shape, or form. When I was a student down in that left field line, it was truly one of the most favorite baseball experiences I've ever had. Now, as I've kind of moved into the press box, moved into the other side of the stadiums, I definitely miss that, but highly, highly, highly recommend anybody head out to Dudy Noble Field. It is a bucket list item on everybody's spot. Everybody's super friendly. You're going to get some great food out there, great teams, and obviously they're going to pack it out. There's a weekend that I would recommend going. It's definitely that Ole Miss weekend, but Dudy Noble Field takes over the spot for Bob Walker for now. I know that's kind of weird to say because it has been the best for almost 5 years now. It is almost hard to believe that it has been open for about 8 years. A&M is going to get renovated. Alex Box is going to get renovated. Foley Field has been renovated. I expect it's going to take a lot for this dude to get unknocked, but again, Mississippi State is our number 1. Moving on into uniform rankings, I'm going to put Mississippi State at number 7 with an asterisk. It feels like I have a theory that when Mississippi State is good, they get incredible uniforms like the ones that we saw with Jake Mangum. And then when they're kind of average or bad, Adidas really punishes them, or Lamotas maybe does, to say, hey, when you get good, you can get the uniforms. I'm going to be honest. Since I've started following Mississippi State baseball, that's since 2016, these have been my least favorite looks. We don't have the Nickelback blacks that we came accustomed to. The pinstripe state ones are pretty good, but I don't really like our road jerseys. I don't like camo stuff. I think we need to get back to basics and just go back to maroon tops, maroon hats, and go from there. Here is the schedule for Mississippi State. Open up with Manhattan and Missouri State before heading down to Houston to be in that College Classic, because I'll be in attendance there. They're going to play Rice, Arizona, and Oklahoma State. So 2 of those 3 teams are regulars in Omaha. Rice, I know, is still kind of rebuilding a little bit. Follow that up with a weekend series against Queens College. They open up with Texas, going to the dude. Then they go to Oklahoma, which I think is probably the most polar opposite of playing at the dude against Texas one week and playing at Oklahoma the next. But then they go to Alex Box. South Carolina comes to the dude. Then they head about an hour west to Alabama, and probably the best road series of any team, as Mississippi State usually takes that stadium over. Florida at Auburn, and then down the stretch, Kentucky, Ole Miss, and Missouri. It is worth noting that some of the midweeks that Mississippi State has scheduled, I think, are tremendous. They play 2 with Southern Miss, who's always kind of a mainstay, and they're kind of in that fringe top 25 range. Obviously, that Governor's Cup with Ole Miss. They also play a Samford team that always seems to live kind of in the tournament, as well as D1 Baseball's 25th ranked team, Troy. So there's going to be a lot to navigate from an RPI standpoint. Obviously, if they can win these kind of early games, have a good showing in Houston, I think that that's where we'll really learn a lot about this team. And those first weekends in the SEC are tough, but they're not as tough as last year's. I know that they opened up with defending champ LSU. They played A&M, who ended up being one of the final two. And I believe that they played Tennessee and Georgia, two teams that hosted and had Omaha aspirations. They went 6-6. That was kind of when we learned a lot about this team going forward. Obviously, this year, it's not really quite the gauntlet that it was last year. But again, Mississippi State's going to have to win all those series at home. They're all winnable series for them. And if they can steal the one from Missouri and Auburn, I think that this is a very good schedule for the Dogs to host from an RPI standpoint. Moving on here to everybody's favorite segment, as I kind of did replace a ton of the highlights. I finally figured out what the deal was with that. I do apologize for a little bit of the blur, though. Armani Larry is gone. David Mershon's gone. Dakota Jordan's gone. I know that there was kind of some rumors about him coming back. He was taken in an overslot round. Hunter Hines was drafted, but he'll be back. Connor Juszczyk, center fielder, he's gone as well. Bryce Chance is back. Logan Kohler, unfortunately, is gone. And then Aaron Downs is going to be back. They are replacing their Friday night guy and their Saturday guy. Pico Kuhn is another guy that we'll talk about here in a second that they really kind of counted on. That's Cal Stevens and Jurangelo Sottrell. I'm going to be honest. I'm really sad to see Jurangelo go. But at the same time, I don't have to try and pretend to pronounce his name correctly because it seemed like I always had to do a check on that. So excited for him to be moving on to Pro Bowl. Overall, Mississippi State had 11 players drafted. Their top three hitters, David Mershon, Connor Juszczyk, and Dakota Jordan, are all gone. Amani Larry has moved on into independent ball. And then their 7 top pitchers by innings are all going to be gone. Obviously, Cal Stevens and Jurangelo Sottrell are going to be two guys that they really, really are going to miss. But they do return Pico Kuhn. And as we move on into the pitching rankings, I want to talk about who I project to be Mississippi State's starters going forward as I kind of scroll down into my notes. Pico Kuhn, obviously, he really, I think, struggled at times. I think he's a guy that's really been there forever. Never lasted more than 4 innings in any starts in SEC play. Really kind of was treated up more of an opener. But when Mississippi State needed him down the stretch, he threw 7 strong innings against one of the most talented lineups in the country in UVA. Absolutely shoved for them. And I think that really gives me a lot of optimism and hope. Can he be the starter? I think that that's ultimately going to be the question with him. Mississippi State has a ton of bullpen guys. Compared to what we talked about last week with LSU, I don't think they have the depth as a pitching staff. I think that they have the high-end guys, but they're really, really going to have to shove. And that's going to be the biggest question mark is they don't have a lot of guys that they can kind of plug and play, get 5 guys out of it. Carson Ligon is, I think, a guy who is going to be the Friday night guy. He definitely has Friday night stuff for him, sitting at about 96, 97. I know that he's another guy that's been there a while. He's added a lot of spin rates on that breaking ball in the fall. The changeup he's starting to throw for strikes. He's a senior form back, really, really advanced. Had sore arms for him last year when he came over from Miami. I know that a lot of fans were kind of disappointed with him. I think the health wasn't all there. And I think if he can stay healthy, he's somebody that I think could be a Cal Stevens role where, against Friday night, you're going to need absolute guys to go out and shove. He's going to be one of those guys. Obviously, Saturday, I think that that's where Pico Kuhn will kind of slide in. It's slider changeup for him. It has a little bit of a ride. He's going to be around 94. He was drafted in the 3rd round. I think that that's where he'll kind of stay this year. Tremendous, tremendous talent from him. From there, I think that that's where we get a little bit of the differ as I do kind of check the names on my pronunciation guide here, just because I know that they had Stone, I think it's Simmons, throw in that weekend game against UAB in the fall. I don't really project him to kind of be in that role. I expect him to kind of be an eating inner. I expect Charlie Foster, the freshman coming over, to be in that Sunday kind of midweek guy. He's got a tremendous, tremendous curveball that's really, really advanced. He's got a good changeup, which again at this age I think goes an absolutely, absolutely long way. I'm really excited to see him going forward. I think he could be a midweek, could be a Sunday guy, but I think this time next year we'll talk about him being a Friday night guy for Mississippi State. He's one guy that I really, really like. Duke Stone, the big fella, I expect him to kind of be in that midweek role, maybe be in the Sunday role if he really, really excels. He's a 6'6" righty. He's a 6'6" righty coming over. Sorry, I had something else about him. 6'6" righty coming over. He's somebody that I think could really slide into this rotation, eat innings, get some good experience early on that, again, I think will pay dividends. He's got an effective curveball, and he's so long with his motion. It really is kind of crazy to see. I went back and watched some of his perfect game highlights from high school, how far he gets down the mound. He kind of reminds me a little bit of just a Randy Johnson, where he gets so far down the mound that the ball kind of gets on you really, really quick. I think that he's going to be the guy that goes in there. Obviously, Stone Simons is another one that could kind of slot into that Sunday role, could be a Saturday guy, but that's who I project to kind of be in that rotation. And then from there, long relief, I have Jacob Pruitt. He's kind of a 92, 93 guy with just some crazy. I believe it's a sinker baller, not technically a fastball. He's got a weird arm slot, good curveball, good off speed. I think he's going to be an absolute innings from there. From there, the back end of the bullpen, I have Chase Hungate and Gavin Black. Hungate's obviously another low arm slot guy coming over from Virginia. Threw a ton of innings for him as he went 7-2 with 3.84 ERA. Really, really effective kind of secondary pitches as well. Obviously, I think he throws more of a two-seam, but with that low arm slot, it almost looks like it's a sinker. He's somebody that I think is going to be at the get back into the bullpen. And then Gavin Black, I know that he's somebody that Lemonis is really, really high on. The one thing that's obviously going to jump out with you if you go and look at his stats is the sub-6 ERA at 5.93. He had a little bit of a walk issue last year, but, I mean, everybody that was at Mississippi State in 2023 had a walk issue. I think another year of being in the program of what Lemonis has built. The strikeouts are there, and I think if he can kind of come in, throw clutch innings for him down the stretch, kind of be almost like a second closer as somebody who kind of closes out a Saturday game, I think those are going to pay really, really big dividends. Obviously, there's a few other guys that we'll touch on here in a little bit. Nolan Sullivan and Nolan Stewart are two-way guys that pitched a little bit. Last year, one of them at another school, and another one for Mississippi State. He's actually going to be more of a position player in the mix this year. I think those are two guys where, almost feel like wild cards, X factors, just because you don't know how they're going to be used with the two-way aspect of it. Two-way players are always kind of tricky to project because they rarely come out of the bullpen. They usually pitch on either a Friday night or a Sunday as a starting pitcher or an opener. So it'll be interesting to see kind of where they do it from there. Mekhi Grant, I think, is another one. How effective he can be. Absolutely electric stuff. He's been up to 98 in the fall. Going forward, I know that he had a Tommy John surgery. I think he's a little bit behind schedule as he just is starting to throw to people. I think that they said he's throwing at about 70 or 80%. Lemonis thinks like he's going to be going good to go. But again, with Tommy John, like I said last week with LSU, it really is hard to project. Obviously, he's not going to come in, throw a ton of innings immediately out of the stretch. He's going to have to work himself up. From what I heard, he didn't participate in any of the fall pitching. So expect him right around an SEC play or a little bit later. That's where I think that he'll kind of ramp up. I have Mississippi State ranked 6th, but I really do think that you can put them in that range with Florida, Auburn, and Georgia. I think that they are a little bit of a step up above Kentucky. The reason that I have them so low, and I say it with parentheses because I still think it's a top 25 staff. Everybody in the SEC or ACC has a top 25 staff. It's just everything, it seems like, has to go perfectly for this Mississippi State pitching staff for them to get into weekends. They don't have a ton of flexibility like Arkansas, LSU, and even Florida to some extent to go in if some of these guys kind of falter. But Pico Kuhn and Pico Kuhn is going to be a guy that is really, really good. Carson Ligon is going to be another guy where they have SEC experience. Those are guys that probably could have been drafted. I think if the draft was a little bit longer, 6-7 years ago, they are drafted. Now players like that are staying in college baseball. I think that's going to pay really, really big dividends for them going forward. But, which Pico Kuhn are we going to see? That always kind of remains to be the question. I know a lot of Mississippi State fans, myself included, felt like he's always kind of been a little bit of a disappointment. I think that he has a chance to kind of break out, be that ace of a staff. Because, again, to get into Omaha, you're going to need more than just an ace. You're going to need a Saturday guy. I think Pico Kuhn's going to be that Saturday guy for Mississippi State going forward. From a projected lineup, as I do kind of scroll up a little bit, like I mentioned, Mississippi State is replacing a ton, but with the way the portal is kind of worked out, everybody's always replacing a ton. And while they are replacing a ton, they have a few guys coming back. Catcher, I think it's going to be the Ross Heifel show. He obviously 2 years ago in 2023 was one of the better bats for him. Last year, he hit 100 for him in 15 games. I know that he's a guy that Lemonis always talks about the athleticism of him. His bat reminded me a little bit of Carson Bowen swing-wise, but I think he plays like Jackson Appel at Texas A&M. super, super athletic catcher who can play center field. I think Lamoda said he ran either a 6'6" or a 6'8". Super, super athletic guy behind the plate, rocket for an arm, has light tower power. I watched that Grambling highlight earlier today, and it's just an easy, quick, fluid motion. But again, he's coming back from an injury. He really has never lived up to his ranking, as he was a very, very highly rated recruit coming out of Madison Central for him, which ironically, that's where Braden Montgomery and his running mate over at first base also came from. Is which one are we going to kind of see from him? I think that he has the tools to be an All-American. I think he has the tools to be a first-rounder. It's just he's never really put it all together, and the hay's kind of in the barn for him. So I expect him to kind of break out, but there's a few guys kind of waiting in the wings if things kind of go wrong. But I feel like it's his job to lose. Lemonis, obviously, he doesn't like to run his guys out every single day, so expect him to kind of DH sometimes, with Joel Powell, Steven Splitta, and Jackson Owen being change of pace to give him rest. I should say that none of those three guys are really bat first, so I don't expect any of them to be in the lineup if Heifel is catching and DHing. But I know Owen specifically has a rocket for an arm. Splitta is kind of a defensive guy. Joel Powell is another guy that I think could really, really kind of be a change of pace for him too as well. Moving over to first base, go ahead and write this one in Sharpie. Hunter Hines is going to be the first baseman. I know that I said last week that, maybe Barrett Jones will play third. That's not the case with Hunter Hines at all. He is probably the absolute lock to be a first baseman. He's been there forever, fourth-year senior from right down the road in Madison Academy. In Madison, Mississippi. Hit 22 home runs as a sophomore. Took a little bit of a step back in 16 last year. Went absolutely ice cold down the stretch in the SEC tournament. In the tournament itself, Hunter Hines is going to bounce back. I think he's going to hit about 330 for him. Unreal bat. I know that when they came for the Texas A&M series last year, Jim Schlossnagle was very, very complimentary of Hunter Hines. He said you always have to be aware of where Hunter Hines is in the lineup. He's going to be another one. He's got 400 career plate appearances. Again, like I felt, the hay's in the barn for Hunter Hines. And what that means is you're going to get a quality SEC first baseman that a lot really don't have in the league. I think that it is a safe bet to assume he's going to be some all honors. It's just going to be a matter of where he kind of does. Then from there's a few other guys just in case they want to do a DH or have guys play other positions. Noah Sullivan and Reed Stallman. Stallman is a lower average guy coming over from Campbell, hit only about 239, but he did have 15 home runs. He's got a longer lefty swing. Mississippi State fans, the swing that he kind of immediately came to mind was Kellum Clark, who was on that national championship team. He can also play left field. He's a little bit more athletic than you would think, and he can play a corner outfield spot tremendously well. Obviously, he can DH enough. The 231 coming over from Campbell, I think, kind of is going to be a lot of fans hesitant to it, but he had a really, really tremendous fall, and he is in that mix for a starting role. It's not going to be at first, but again, he's coming over as a first baseman. Noah Sullivan, like I said, I mentioned him earlier, being as a two-way guy. He's coming over from UC Upstate. He hit 313 for them and experienced, I think, a tremendous power growth as he kind of grew into his body, hitting 17 home runs. Also walks a ton, as he walked more than he struck out. I really like him as kind of a change of pace righty bat, just because Hines is a lefty one. He's somebody that, again, I think could pitch. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how they use him because he's about the same pitching as he is hitting, to where he's in the mix for it, but he's not going to be a guy. So interesting to see how they use him going forward. Next up, moving over second base, we have Sawyer Reeves. He's another guy that's been there forever. He's a senior too coming over. He can play short coming over from the Citadel. I do apologize. He's just been in college baseball a while as he's a senior. Had a really, really good sophomore year for him as he hit over 314. Last year, he followed it up hitting 304. He's another guy that I think can unlock a little bit of power and make the dudes feel extremely small. Like I said, Lemonis has him projected as the second baseman, but he was in the mix for short. And like we talked about with Milam, is if Milam ended up being at second, same thing with Sawyer Reeves here, you're going to get a tremendous defensive second baseman. I don't think that they'll have the problem that they had last year defensively with David Mershon as he took a step back the defense took a step back when he moved over to short. If Sawyer Reeves somehow magically finds himself in as the shortstop, the defense is not going to take it. He has really, really good hands. It's good to kind of watch him take ground balls, as it does seem almost second nature. Like all these drills that he's done these past 4 years are really paying off. I'm excited to see where Sawyer Reeves kind of does. I think he could kind of be in that SEC newcomer of the year. But, it is going to be interesting to see. Shortstop, we have freshman Dylan Cupp. And while he has not played in the fall as he works back from a knee injury, he's somebody that is really, really good. He was the best prep glove in the 2023 draft class, according to MLB Pipeline. You almost forget how highly recruited he was just because he didn't play last year. He's a guy that turned down first-round money, and Lemonis absolutely raves about him. He said, quote, "We feel like Cub's got a chance to be a star. He was a star coming out of high school, and he's just got back out there and get healthy. He started every game until he got hurt last year." Again, he's got another guy, high leg kick. The bat swing and really the way that he plays kind of reminds me of Ke'Bryan Hayes from the Pirates. Tremendous glove, rocket for an arm, kind of a long, loopy swing. But it has gotten a lot longer since his high school days in a good way. I know that the film that I watched at his prospects camp his junior year, it was really kind of a quiet load swing that really didn't generate a ton of power. But the stuff that I saw from this fall at the Mississippi State is he had kind of a cocking motion where he worked himself in. Obviously, I think that that's going to translate to more power. And I think he's a guy that you could really kind of see breaking out onto the scene as a pick to click. That leaves us with third base. And that is who Lemonis said is going to be Ace Reese. Ace Reese is somebody who I saw a ton as he was just down the road at Houston. He played left field for him. He played DH for him. Had an unreal fall for Mississippi State, hitting over 450, was really their best player. Lemonis said he was the best hitter of the fall. He impressed early at Houston as he hit safely in 12 of his first 13 games. I should say that down the stretch, as Houston struggled, Ace Reese kind of struggled too as well. Obviously, Houston didn't really have enough to play for. They played in a lot of lethargic games, and Ace Reese, I think, was a product of that environment. Now that he's kind of in the SEC, kind of at a Mississippi State, where he's going to be playing in all these big games, I think Ace kind of shines. I think that he's somebody that you could really kind of see breaking out. I know that there were a ton of SEC schools that called on Ace Reese when he went for his projection. Texas was one that I know that called on him. LSU looked at him a little bit too as well. From Canyon, Texas, which I believe is actually closer to Starkville than it is to the University of Houston. So he's home in a way, but he's a guy that you could really kind of see. I'm going to be honest, I haven't seen him take ground balls at third. I haven't seen what his footwork looks like at third just because every time I saw him, he was in the outfield. So I'm a little bit unsure of how the defense is going to look, but a supremely athletic guy who I felt was a little bit more athletic than left field. Moving over into the outfield, Nolan Stevens is going to be the right fielder. Obviously, he was more of a pitcher, but he was up there at the New England Collegiate League, which is kind of the second tier Cape Cod League. Was an all-star for them. I think he hit over 350 for him. Lefty with a ton of pop. I think that he's really kind of grown into his body, grown into his swing, and I expect him to kind of win. I should say this. When I looked at some of the film of his from high school, and again, I don't know if it was nerves. I don't know if it was just that was kind of a bad habit, but he did kind of short arm the ball. But when you watched him, some of the assists that I saw in the fall, that really seemed to be out of his rotation. Like he has a really strong arm. So while initially I was really worried about what his defense was going to be, I think he has the arm to be a right fielder, and he has an arm to be an addition to it, as he had 2 putouts and assists for in the fall. But again, I think he's still a glove first guy from a swing standpoint. I'm not saying he has the power or the athleticism, but the swing itself looks very significant to Jack Caglione from Florida. Like instantly, the second I saw his swing, that's what I thought was Jack Caglione. Obviously, I don't think he has the power, but it's really not that far off. And again, a supremely athletic guy. Moving over into center field, again, it's Bryson Chance. We saw what he did last year. Super athletic guy, a grinder. I know that he's a little bit of a smaller guy, coach's best friend, peace of mind center fielder, almost like those throwback ones that we had with Jake Mangum. I think he's a little bit more athletic than Jake Mangum was. I don't think he's obviously as good of a hitter as Jake Mangum was, but a captain that you can kind of circle in the lineup, everyday guy, Pete Rose type that's going to give you 110% every single time. Bryson Chance being in center field, I think, is a really good sight to see for Mississippi State. Left field, we have Aaron Downs. He was kind of in the mix, I think, to be a center fielder, and if Bryson Chance isn't the mainstay that he is in the lineup, I think he has an argument to be the center fielder. 6'5" speed with pop. Again, he's going to be another guy if he can put it all together. He started 24 games for Mississippi State last year, 11 in left field, 7 as the designated hitter, 4 in right field. Picked up his best game against that LSU game, which I went back and watched. He had a really great approach. He fouled off a few pitches in some counts. He ambushed counts in some. He finished with the career best 305, 29 hits, 9 RBIs. He was really, really great down the stretch for this Mississippi State team. He even got to pinch hit in that game for them as well. So he's a guy that I really, really like. Then obviously in the mix, Lemonis mentioned Garrig Friel coming over from Northern Alabama. I think he's somebody that could kind of play infield, be a corner spot. Lucas Buckner is another one coming over. He was a highly decorated recruit coming over from Tennessee. Son of a kid. I think he's another one that going forward will be in the lineup more. Lemonis called him crazy dynamic was the words that he used. Can play anywhere. You might see him in the outfield. You might see him up the middle if stuff kind of goes haywire. He's one. And then lastly, Ethan Pullman and Michael O'Brien are two options in the outfield. Pullman played a little bit of second base, but I don't think he's in the mix there at all. But he played center during the fall against UAB. I think that he's going to be one there. Super, super athletic guy. Kind of reminds me of a Travis Chestnut from Texas A&M. Super, super twitchy guy. And then Michael O'Brien was, I believe, the punter. I'll have to double check because I know that Mississippi State had one guy that was a punter for him that didn't participate in fall workouts, but I think he'll kind of be in the mix, which ironically, when I was at Mississippi State, we had a baseball player that was also the punter. He was a relief pitcher, so it is kind of good to see that coming back. SEC teams ranked. Again, I think that when you kind of get into this, I have the SEC in tiers right now. I have S tier, A tier, B tier. I don't think anybody's below B tier. I have Mississippi State firmly in A tier. They have an argument over Georgia. Kentucky has an argument over Mississippi State. The reason that I put Mississippi State over Kentucky is Kentucky's relying a lot on transfer guys. You really are trusting Nick Maggione a little bit more than the guys themselves, which, I mean, they went to Omaha last year, so that is kind of a good bet. But Mississippi State is a lot more experience. Hunter Hines coming back, Bryson Chance, Pico Kuhn. They have guys that you can count on to be SEC guys going forward. But the reason I have them behind Georgia is just the pitching. I think that they have better talent and they peak a little bit higher than Georgia. I just don't think that they have the depth to where if they were to get an injury, if they were to kind of slip there, I'm not sure how that they would be able to recover, as it really only seems like they're rolling with 7 or 8 guys. But the guys that make it on the field at hitting are going to be a talented Mississippi State hitting team going forward. Lastly, here is where I have them. Far left, I think they are one of the few SEC teams that could miss the tournament. I know that seems daunting, almost hard to believe, but if the pitching takes a step back and returns to where it was in 2023, with how it is, I mean, they very realistically could miss the tournament. Where I think that they're going to land, they're going to be in that 15 to 20 range from a hosting standpoint. They're going to be pitted up against the Georgias, the South Carolinas, the Vanderbilts of the SEC for one of those final hosting spots. I think that they do end up being one of the hosts outside of that. And then obviously their peak is the College World Series. They made a living going to the College World Series. It seemed like every year when I was a student there. I don't expect that to kind of change. I would never be shocked if Lemonis gets them back to the College World Series. The pitching clicks. The lineup has the talent to get them to the College World Series. I believe that that's all we have right now. Final notes coming over from Mississippi State. Again, this feels like a vintage Mississippi State team. I don't think they're quite back to, Mangum levels, but this reminds me a ton of that 2016 team that ended up winning the SEC tournament that year. They went to a super regional with LSU. That's kind of the makeup I have of this team. Bat first, obviously. I think that there are a few guys in here that have an argument to be a freshman of the year candidate. At minimum, I think freshman All-American, if some of those pitchers that I talked about really, really click, get meaningful innings, they're going to have a chance to go in and do that. Hunter Hines is going to still hit at an unbelievable rate. My prediction, and here's my kind of bold take, is that Ross Highfield steps out and is a second-team All-SEC catcher, which, again, he hit 100, so it feels crazy to kind of go and say that about somebody. The bat is there. The talent is there. He was a highly, highly, highly heralded recruit that everybody's kind of been waiting around to do things. I think that this is the year for Ross Highfield going forward. As we kind of roll up on that 30-minute, next week's going to be a little bit of a special Southern Fried Baseball episode, as we will be doing a trifecta. It's going to be Ole Miss, Missouri, and Oklahoma. I'm going to be honest with you. 2 of these 3 teams are going to be last and second to last in my rankings. but one of them is going to be a little bit higher than you think. So go ahead and tune in next week to see who I have ranked higher. But again, thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next week for that trifecta.